Washington Post is publishing a multi-part investigative piece, a deep dive into veterans who are committing fraud when they apply for benefits. And this piece, the way that it's written, is frankly, I think, incredibly damaging, and it's going to help the Trump administration enact the part of Project 2025 that is the most ambitious. I mean, the authors of Project 2025 wrote that the veterans benefits thing is like the third rail. Now, to be clear, I don't think that the individual journalists who worked on this story that is their intent at all, but I do think that that was the strategic decision that was made by the Trump VA when they refused to answer questions. Those unanswered questions prevented the journalists from having a full understanding of what they were writing about. Now, I want to emphasize, I personally subscribe to the Washington Post. I feel this is my obligation because I'm someone who interacts with journalists at the Post. I do respect these journalists. I am not one of those creators who says that mainstream media is dead. And if I had a problem with generating income for billionaires, I wouldn't be able to use this app, and neither would any of the people in the comments. So this is going to be like a little bit of a deep dive because this is a very nuanced story and it takes time to explain. So here's the problem. If you were to be a civilian who doesn't know about how veterans benefits work, or if you're a policymaker who cares, but this is not your area of expertise, if you were to read this story, you would come away with the general idea that there are a lot of veterans who are applying for disability benefits under fraudulent circumstances, that they are getting paid for disabilities that they do not have, or they are exaggerating in their disabilities. And you might come away with the idea that most veterans applying for disability benefits are exaggerating. Or to be generous, you might come away with the idea that veterans don't deserve the benefits, the compensation that they're getting. And again, to be fair to the journalists who wrote this, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, refusing to sit down with the Washington Post and explain and provide a narrative, that was a strategic decision by the Trump administration because it accomplishes two things. One, it allowed the Washington Post to produce a story that leaves people with these false impressions about veterans committing fraud. And two, it gives them the opportunity to say, oh, it's the Washington Post, it's the liberal, Bezos-controlled Washington Post that's coming after veterans. And those veterans, of course, deserve benefits. So they get to undermine faith in the VA, both in the minds of veterans and in the minds of civilians whose tax dollars do support our benefits. And they undermine all of our trust in the institution that is Washington Post. To be clear, I'm not saying that either of these institutions are perfect. I don't believe that there's any perfect person or institution, but I get all of my healthcare at the VA. I have gotten all of my healthcare at the VA since 2007. I used to really dislike the VA. I felt very uncomfortable there. I felt like it was a hostile environment. But at 21 years old, I was fresh out of Iraq and I didn't feel good anywhere. And the VA under the Bush administration was drastically underfunded and not at all prepared for veterans of the global war on terror to be stacked on top of World War II veterans who were still alive then, Korean War veterans, and all the Vietnam vets. The wait times for appointments was tremendous back then. The backlog for disability claims and payouts for those disability claims was tremendous. And it was very difficult for me as an Iraq veteran exposed to things like burn pits to prove that my burn pit exposure resulted in things like me needing to have surgery in my sinuses or taking an inhaler or taking 2 allergy meds both in morning and night because otherwise I can't breathe. When I had a random mass in my lung that they could not explain, I could not prove that it was from burn pit exposure. So Congress passed laws to make it easier. The PACT Act makes it easier for those exposed to toxins, whether it's burn pits or Agent Orange or nuclear waste or experiments. The PACT Act made it easier for people who are exposed to toxic elements to claim disability benefits for their ailments. Now, what the Washington Post story focuses on is the idea that when the benefits system was first set up after World War II, which is kind of its modern iteration, even though that's almost a century ago, that the original idea was to compensate people for hours that they couldn't spend on a factory floor. Meaning that if you were an amputee and you had to be some position that got paid less than a manual laborer, that you were compensated a certain percentage to fill the gap. So right at the beginning of the Washington Post investigative piece, they establish this. They say this is what the disability benefits system was built for. Now, that was true at a time, but now the modern understanding of what it is to go to war, what it is to survive war, what it is to serve even if you don't go to war, the training that you experience, the toxins that you are exposed to, those are things that cause you harm. And we live in an era of AI and automation and working from home. Disability benefits are not given to compensate you for not being able to physically stand on a factory floor like it's the 1940s or 1950s. Disability benefits are for veterans to be made whole. Now, as someone with PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, which manifests in a variety of ways, but in the past it was, self-medication with alcoholism. And sometimes it means crippling depression for up to a year where I can't even work, let alone maintain relationships or live a healthy life in any way. If I could trade that away for my disability compensation, I would gladly do it. There is no amount of money that makes it worth it to have to live with post traumatic stress disorder for the rest of my life. Now, if you read this Washington Post article and you didn't know about all of this, you might have read, oh, well, this person, because they're a disabled veteran, they get free healthcare for the rest of their life. So why should they also get those disability payments? Personally, I think that every American ought to have free healthcare. I think that we should be like the rest of the industrialized nations, the rest of the comparable democracies around the world. We should make it so that every American does not have to face the choice of crippling debt or debilitating illness. That is not a choice that makes you free, but it is a choice that makes you uniquely American. I don't think that anyone should have to deal with that. So that's my baseline. But I am someone who, thankfully had better and better experiences with the VA as time has gone on. It's been nearly 2 decades where I've been working on addressing PTSD and all of the other physical ailments that I have as a result of the 4 years that I served on active duty. But even with free access to comprehensive healthcare, it doesn't make the illnesses or the injuries go away. One of the secondary effects of PTSD and the stress and anxiety that comes from that, I have stomach problems. Without daily treatment, without daily medication, I get stomach acid coming up into my esophagus that creates inflammation, a higher likelihood of cancer, and it makes it so that I can't even swallow food. Now, I have tried many different medicines and treatments to address this, but the only one that works is one that also makes me more likely to experience dementia as I get older. This is not an illness that runs in my family, but it is an illness that seems to be caused by burn pit exposure. Now, the way that the Washington Post article is written, if you read that, you might hear about my disability and say, well, that doesn't stop him from working. He takes a medicine every day so he doesn't have to deal with the symptoms. What is he getting paid for? Well, I'm getting compensated because this is a life-changing illness that doesn't go away because I'm taking a pill. And again, my only choice, the only medication that I've found to fix this problem that again is a secondary effect of PTSD and or might be from burn pit exposure, decades from now, I might lose who I am because of dementia, because of the medicine that I have to take, because it's the only treatment that works. The veterans disability system is a complex thing, and it used to be really inhumane for a lot of veterans. And it is still very difficult on a lot of veterans to get the benefits that they deserve. I can tell you, as someone who has experienced debilitating depression, that when I'm experiencing my worst symptoms and I do try to apply for disability benefits, or did try to apply for disability benefits, the crippling depression made it impossible. So the idea that it's too easy for veterans to get these benefits is just simply wrong. And I don't put this on the Washington Post. I know at least one of the journalists behind that story. I put this on the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, a political appointee of Donald Trump, who made the strategic choice of not answering questions, of not sitting for an interview, so that the Washington Post could push a narrative that was helpful to the Trump administration and Project 2025 of undermining support in the VA and having the benefit of also undermining the support of Washington Post, drawing anger towards the Washington Post for a bad story, so that they could then use that story, that narrative, to start taking away benefits from veterans, to save money for billionaires, because that is the ultimate goal of the Trump administration. Donald Trump said as much this weekend. And just remember that 1/3 of the federal employees who are furloughed right now, they're veterans. And Donald Trump wants to make sure that they're not paid. That guy has had it out for us for a really long time. And now the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, is helping him screw us over.